Let's start a podcast about our mental health for no good reason why. Let's call it Mind Cake.
Hello, gorgeous listeners, and welcome to another slice of Mind Cake. Mind Cake? With me, Lee Crompton. No Paul again this week. He is up to his nuts, polar expressing, entertaining the children of this nation with his moustache. So, just me, but happy December. And this week we have an incredible guest who embodies the phrase from pain to purpose. She has faced immense challenges in her life, but has not only managed to overcome them, she's turned them into a springboard for an entirely new life. And today we're going to meet Karen Roberts. What began as a personal quest for healing turned into a complete reinvention, physically, mentally, and professionally. Now, I don't want to give too much away, but have you ever wondered what might happen if you cut out the things in life holding you back? Not just the obvious culprits like unhealthy habits or toxic relationships, but just the subtle things that we cling to because they're familiar. Now for Karen, that meant everything from rethinking a diet to tackling perfectionism head on, and even diving into some serious chilly waters. Now, you might be discovering at this point why Paul might have body swerved this one. Anyway, her story isn't just about healing, it's about transforming. Along the way, Karen discovered a clarity and strength she didn't know she had, and today she's using those lessons to help others through her coaching practice, Vivendus. This episode is packed with insights and inspiration for anyone who's ever felt stuck, wondered if there's another way, or just needed a little nudge to take that first step towards change. So grab a cuppa, settle in, and let's dive into my conversation with the incredible Karen Roberts. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mind Cake, where this week we are joined by the wonderful Karen Roberts. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, Lee. Good to speak to you.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us. Now, you have set up Vivendus. Did I get that right?
You did get that right.
I did get that right. Okay, good. Do you want to talk through what inspired you to start Vivendus and how your journey began?
Wow. Okay. So I won't labour it too much, but it started with pain in my body.
Okay.
So I have arthritis and was diagnosed when I was about 21. And I haven't really had a lot of help with it over the years. And it's been up and down, but not aided by what I was eating and drinking. And I didn't know that at the time. So a few years ago, I found another wonderful podcast called Phoenix Helix. And this was a lady in the States. And also I found another one in the Southern Hemisphere, but really looking at what's known as the autoimmune protocol.
Okay.
It's looking at any kind of illness that has inflammation markers or is an autoimmune type disease. So that includes lots of things, sort of arthritis and fibromyalgia and lots of other things. I started to look at this and realised that my diet really was almost at the extreme of what was recommended.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been vegetarian for a really long time. I just actually started eating meat and fish, but I was still quite heavily pasta, rice, potatoes, based, very carb heavy, quite very starchy, and drank quite a lot. Not on a regular basis, so not a daily or even a weekly drinker, but pretty much a binge drinker. So when I drank a lot.
Yeah.
And also had a fondness for baking and family at home and baked quite a lot. So all of the things actually that don't go well with an autoimmune type diet.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was reading about this and listening to what these people on the pod were saying, it became really apparent that people had real massive success without taking medication. So that was another thing. I was on a huge amount of painkillers every day. and it was getting worse, and the painkillers I was having to keep upping and upping. So not great, and that upsets your tummy as well. So it's not brilliant. But this was, it's no exaggeration to say it was life-changing. I started the autoimmune protocol, which meant cutting out all inflammatory foods. Initially, the first month was brutal. So that cut out all meat, all starchy carbs, all sugars, including alcohol, of course. Well, really, it's easier to say what you could eat. There was green leafy vegetables,
Right. Yeah.
fish. It was really limited for the first month. And coffee. Coffee was a real love of mine. And then to
So
start
sorry,
with,
you could drink coffee or you couldn't drink
I
coffee.
couldn't for
No
the
coffee.
first month. Yeah.
Right.
Fortunately, I can now.
Right.
But then you start to reintroduce things and to see, what happens.
Mhm.
The interesting thing about coffee is that 50% of society can drink coffee because it reduces inflammation, and the other half, sadly, can't because
Right.
it causes inflammation. I'm really lucky to say that I can drink coffee, so it's still
Right.
very much on the table, coffee is. But I found that the main things that were causing my inflammation and caused me immediate pain is lower back, essentially, but I do have my hands and feet as well. But lower back is where the real pain is. The main things were wheat, sugar, and alcohol.
Right.
So since that day, that was May 2021, I haven't had any of those things, wheat,
Really?
sugar, alcohol. And if I have had them inadvertently when I've eaten out, when I've bought something that's meant to be gluten-free, or it's not meant to have any of those things in, I know within a couple of hours, I
Oh,
know
really?
it's on fire. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, it's an almost immediate response. So I know I've eaten something that when they've said there hasn't been any wheat in it, there has. Yeah. But in all of that time, since 2021, I've not taken any pain medication at all.
Wow. And how
Completely.
long were you on the painkillers for before?
Oh, decades.
Oh, really?
Decades, yeah. And max every day.
Wow.
I would have to set my alarm to take meds before I actually got up because
Mhm.
it would take me half an hour to an hour to get out of bed in the morning. So
Wow. And
I
now
had to
you're not
take
on anything.
to even get me moving. None at all now.
So am I right in saying that you basically bring it back to a baseline for a month and then start adding bits,
That's right.
I presume if you're adding a bit at a time, you can tell, oh, hang on a minute, that's
That's not working for me,
that's
or
not working.
that's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, exactly. So things like so wheat is a no. So there's no pasta or anything like that, and
Mm.
no bread. However, some people are unable to take any other starches, so potatoes, rice, or any kind of other carbs. I can in small doses. So if I
Okay.
had some rice one day and I'd only have a small portion of rice, I wouldn't then eat rice again the next day, or potatoes.
Mhm.
I'd perhaps have a starchy carb once or twice a week
Right.
because they also then turn to sugars if you have too many. So
Mhm.
the sugar element kicks in then. So I'm fine. I can have a jacket potato, I can have some mashed potato with a steak or something like that. Absolutely fine. But I wouldn't then repeat that within a
Yeah.
few days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
So it's
goes back to your binging, doesn't it?
limiting now.
You wouldn't binge on mashed potatoes, what we're saying.
Well, it's quite hard to, but mash is quite nice with a
It's
healthy dose
nice,
of
yeah.
butter, isn't it?
Bit of
Yeah.
horseradish in, I like.
Yeah, great. And I'm great with all dairy, which also is a blessing because I love butter and I love
Right.
yogurt.
Ah.
So dairy's good. But I know a lot of people do struggle with dairy when they have any kind of inflammation, but it's fine for me.
Well, I don't know whether you listened to the episode that we did with nutritionist. We were going to get her back on. So she was from the States,
Yeah.
and we are going to get her back on because she, as well as, have you heard of the How Not to Die cookbook?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she's friends with the guy, Michael Greger, I think his name is, who wrote that and is of a same sort of opinion.
Yeah.
But she was going to come back on. She said, "Oh, I'll have to do a whole. If you want me to talk about milk and dairy, that's a whole nother episode." And I was like, "Oh, okay, really?" So, yeah, I've suddenly been hearing more and more with the people I've been talking to about the fact that milk isn't necessarily.
Yeah. I agree. I think for a lot of people it doesn't suit.
Mm,
And I actually don't even like milk, so I don't drink milk anyway. But
mhm,
I do like Greek yogurt, and I eat that. Yeah, I do have butter because I don't like processed food anyway. So
mm,
I've never bought margarine ever. So
mm,
butter is what I use, and then for cooking I use olive oil because again I think too much in the seed oils can cause inflammation as well.
mhm.
Doesn't The autoimmune protocol doesn't talk about seed oils, but I know that you speak to anybody in the last 12 months about seed oils, and there's a lot of writing about them. So I don't use those either. So I think the next step, so sorry that we did kind of labour the point really about the diet change, but that led on to me then not drinking.
Yeah.
That's the key trigger for where I got to now. Right. So we've parked the pain, and brilliant. So I was able to then get back to exercise, get back to the gym, strength training, swimming. I enjoy cold water swimming. So I swim in my local Lido, which is a cold water pool, and I swim in the sea. So yeah, great. On the exercise front, everything's starting to come back together. And we all know that when we start to exercise, we feel better in ourselves as well. So that has been missing from my life for some time. So it's great to have that back. The other thing was not drinking. It wasn't an instant thing, but I would say after probably perhaps 3 months of not drinking, the clarity of thought and my ability to deal with things was so much better. And I decided to start a course of study. So this was back in 21 again, but at the end of the summer. And so I looked for probably about a month to see what am I going to study? What am I going to do? I hadn't studied for some time. I'd got to an age where I thought, I've had a really big, successful corporate career. I'm ready for a change. Still need to earn money, still got a bit of mortgage and stuff, so I've still got outgoing. So it's not a folly where I can just go off and study for 3 years and not do anything. So I studied part-time. I realised probably after about a year that studying part-time around a really busy job, I was the director of procurement at ASOS at the time, was not going to work. So I made the really tough decision to leave my job, but it was planned. I probably took 12 months to plan it, save some money up, and planned how I would continue the course of study. And then spent the summer of last year. So I finished my role at ASOS in April, and then spent the summer studying. And so studied full time, which I absolutely loved, to become a life coach.
Right, okay.
Now, my course of study, I handpicked because it was a dual course of life coaching and counselling. Because when I selected it, I didn't know whether I wanted to do one or the other. And you probably know this, but I'll explain it just in case some of the listeners don't. Counselling, in very, very crude terms, looks at what's gone before. Coaching sets people up for the future. And so yeah, I mean, there'll be a lot of people listening who will scream and say, no, it's not that. But that's in the very basic terms. There's one's really reflecting and one's really setting people up for the future. And it's useful to be able to do both. So when I got to the end of my training, I'm a qualified and certified coach. I'm not a qualified and certified counsellor, but I have completed basic counselling training. So I do have those skills. But the reason I wanted to do both was because I didn't know which direction I wanted to go in, which way would I take it? And I found probably about 3/4 of the way through my training that forward thinking was me. I was less, well, it's not that I'm not interested in unpicking the past. I think I'm better at working with people who are looking at the future. And obviously we need to reflect, and there are reasons why people behave in the way they do. So we unpick that. But if anything gets into anything deep-rooted trauma or anything, I'm the first to be referring them on for counselling, for therapy. But it's useful to have the skills and understanding. So I got to the end of my training, but this was all really based on the fact that I stopped drinking. I don't think for 1 minute I would have taken those decisions had I still been drinking.
And like you say, 3 months.
I would have had the clarity of mind.
Yeah, 3 months to get out your system.
Yeah. And I wasn't even a massive drinker. I mean, I think people that would go out with me would say I was, because I'd be the last person standing and I'd wait for the birds to tweet before I gave in. It's probably the competitive side of me that drove that. But I wasn't doing it all the time. I would say it wasn't even a weekly activity. I'd probably go out a couple of times a month, but do it in style. But yeah, so I would say there's probably about 3 months before I really had that clarity of thinking, do you know, this is a new life for me. I realised that without drinking, it wasn't a life. I said I'd got back to the gym. I'd always been super sporty when I was younger, and then that went by the wayside with the pain and medication and working a lot of hours as well. So yeah, it was that catalyst. And I'd heard other people say that and thought you had to be at rock bottom, before if you drinking, you had to be at rock bottom and then have that big life-changing thing, But absolutely not. You can be the normal, and people call it the grey area now, drinking. You can be in that zone and not think you've got a problem. And it wasn't a problem. But when you've come out the other side of it, you realize, oh, actually, you're only kind of 80% of the person that you could be.
Yeah.
So on reflection, it sounds, it is a bit, isn't it? But, I don't mean it to sound like that. I just feel like I'm a different person coming out the other side. And I've never anticipated that happening.
No, I mean, it's strange really when you say that, in that the epiphany, if you want to call it that,
Mm,
wasn't having been on painkillers for decades and
mm,
coming off the painkillers and beginning to exercise, where you suddenly thought, wow, now I'm a new person, is
yeah.
actually when you'd fix that bit, for want of a better expression.
Mm,
And then, like you say, almost this Brucey bonus where you've given up
yeah.
drinking, and then that was the moment that you went, oh, hang on a minute, now I see.
Yeah, that was the
Wow.
surprise. A surprise I didn't expect at all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's what,
So that's how you've ended up where you've ended up.
yeah, with setting up a
Wow.
coaching business called Vivendus. I still do a little bit of consulting in the procurement world, which was my previous life. There's part of me that thinks, well, I had 30 years experience. Why would I, just
Yeah, yeah.
completely put that in the bin? And another part of me knows that it's going to take me a couple of years, 3 years maybe, to
Mm.
develop a big enough coaching business for it to be giving me a proper salary, let's
Sure.
say.
Sure.
But it's amazing. I love it.
Uh-huh. I
I
bet.
think I'm a natural researcher, a natural student,
Uh-huh.
and coaching brings me this.
Taps into all that.
Yes, I mean, some people think that coaching gives you the satisfaction because clients are, you can see the improvement and development with clients, and they're reaching their goals and doing what they want to do. Obviously, that's amazing, but it's also the challenges that new clients bring, or
Mhm.
even existing clients, that you dig deeper and you find challenges in there that you need to go off and then find out more and look at different techniques. And before this call, I was on an hour and a half NLP course because I
Uh-huh.
love NLP and
Uh-huh.
I'm really getting into that. So I'm on a course a week and 90 minutes a day.
Brilliant.
Um, and that ongoing learning
Yeah.
is it's really does tick a big box for me. I've realized when I started to do some deep values work in what's really important to me, growth is number one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because my next question was going to be, what are the most common challenges faced by your clients? And I guess, having listened to you there, do you find the challenges are more emotional challenges, or do you find them more in, I want to, sort of career challenges,
I
or
have
a
a couple of
mixture?
clients who I'm doing career work with.
Mhm.
There is it's very much of 2024, coming out of a pandemic, of how much time people spend on social media.
Mhm.
And I think I remember one of your pods, I think somebody was talking about that as well. The biggest challenges I see, if I put them in order of number of clients that come to me with these things, the number one is probably perfectionism.
Mhm.
And I think that does stem firmly from comparison culture. Yeah, I mean, people kind of may have been perfectionists when they were teenagers.
Mhm.
If that's the case, then we work through that, and there may be some limiting belief from their past. Yeah. People, however, that maybe weren't perfectionists when they were teenagers, but are now,
Mhm.
is more likely to stem from social media and access to all of this information about what
Mhm.
everybody else is doing and what we think the dreaded should word, what we should be doing,
Yes. Yeah.
at a certain age and everything else. So perfectionism is massive and it really holds people back. Some people wear it as a badge of honor, but it's actually a really limiting trait
Mhm.
that can stop you from getting started. I think there's a phrase I use that perfection is perception. And that is a big thing, that somebody might work in isolation and create something that they think is wonderful, show it to somebody else, but in their view,
Mhm.
it's not what they were looking for.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then there's disappointment and, you go down the whole thing. So perfection, I think, is probably the number one thing that comes through
Okay.
for me at the moment. There's also lots of people coming to me with the not a syndrome, imposter syndrome, but it's kind of tied into perfectionism sometimes.
Yeah.
And there are lots of different types of imposters in different situations and reason why. So that's then could lead on to people with anxiety issues, and that goes quite deep as well.
Mhm.
And then I think the third one that I would say in order of volume of people is people pleasing.
Yeah.
So those three, I think, are the most common things that people come to me with. So it's perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and people pleasing.
Right.
And there's lots of other things around lack of confidence, lack of self-esteem.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of those things, all three of those things, I would tackle. The first two things I would do there with all three of those for different reasons will be looking at their values. We're doing a whole, probably 1 or 2 sessions, just picking out what are their core values, because some people don't know and they've never thought about it. And if their life's not quite working for them, looking at values can pinpoint where the gaps are and what they can be focusing on. And then coming out of values, especially from the people pleasing one, would be to look at boundaries, linking boundaries to values. So where they've got a core value, is that being met in their world? And if it's not, why not? What do they need to put in place to enable it to happen? Sometimes it's an action that comes out of that. Sometimes it's a boundary that will enable it to happen. To give them the time or the permission to do something. It may be boundary driven.
Yeah, I mean, one of the early episodes, I think it was probably the 3rd episode, I still see a clinical psychologist, Dr. Jan, who's been on the podcast a couple of times. And I did ACT therapy with her.
Yeah,
which
I
again,
listened to that
she's got
episode.
her deck of cards.
Yeah.
And laid them all out and what are your core values, and whether that's, whatever you're going to do, like eat the piece of cake or whatever it might be, is that a towards move or is that an away move? So no, this is all kind of
I love that. I found that episode super interesting. So I've got it on my list of things to read up more about, being
ACT's great.
that researcher that I am here.
No, I've got his book. It's I'm trying to think of his name. Russ Harris is the guy, and his books are great. So the next question was, how do you help your clients find fulfillment in their lives, especially when they feel stuck or overwhelmed? But I suppose we've kind of talked about that.
And interesting. So yes, I do a lot of values and boundaries work, and the word stuck is really, really topical, because the NLP course that I'm on this week, so I've done quite a bit of NLP in my training, and I do use NLP, especially visualization.
Sorry, for those who don't know what NLP is.
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a course that I'm on this week. It's actually called Unstuck. So where you say stuck, this course is about how to get clients from being stuck to unstuck, and looking at the boundaries that they've put in place themselves around where they are with their particular challenges and problems, and using visualization techniques. And today we're looking even at eye movements and which way you tend to look to remember something or create a picture of something.
Oh, really?
And then we start to play with our minds in creating something and it moving over to becoming a memory, because our brains can sometimes not distinguish between an image we've created or a real image. So that's really clever. And it's only Thursday, so tomorrow, so I've not got to the end of the course yet. Tomorrow's is the last day, and that's actual practice of that. So that's really quite interesting.
I mean, I don't want to go back to Dr. Jan again, but again, I did some EMDR with her.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And again, that's complete witchcraft. She admits that herself. If you said to me beforehand, oh yeah, there's this thing where, but again, that's kind of this thing where you're using eye movement or whatever to try and move that image to the back of the filing cabinet, rather than being a traumatic memory.
It's almost the opposite of what we're doing here in creating a visualization that we want to appear real.
Yes. So how do you measure progress or success, and are there specific indicators that you look for
in a client? So in the most practical sense, we set out, I usually do a program with a client. So I will do a pre-assessment, which I've got an extensive form that they complete, and then we'll have a consultation to go through the output of that form and the key areas. So if we agree that we're going to do a 6-session or a 12-session program, I don't meet them too frequently, because we set a lot of goals. So in the practical sense, there are goals that are set. There's homework that's set. In the sessions, we do a mix of, I teach techniques, and we obviously have a coaching discussion where I don't talk too much. I ask a lot of questions and then they do the talking. But sometimes, depends on the client, but some clients really enjoy learning new techniques. So we'll do exercises together, and they enjoy that. So in how to measure that, the goal setting is easy because we chunk those up into small, measurable actions. And the reason I leave sufficient time between sessions, and usually 3 or 4 weeks,
Oh,
is to
really?
give.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see people on a weekly or even
Right.
fortnightly basis. I want them to go away with the new techniques and find the situations to apply them. So at the end of a session, we'll be agreeing when we're going to meet again, but that will only be dependent upon them in the session identifying when they have got the situations to be able to start to apply the techniques. And then when they come back, they would have met some goals in that, in
Great.
feeding back how those situations went. And as I say, sometimes it could be 6 weeks, because it's something they want to apply in the work scenario, and they literally haven't got a meeting or whatever it is that they want to do. 'Cause in a work scenario, it could be something like presentation skills, and again, we'd use visualization in that. So they need to be able to demonstrate it and work on it. And it's a little bit like the kind of the vaccination principle, isn't it? You know, things have got to hurt a little bit for them, and they need to keep, having a little dose of this before they can improve. So yeah, sometimes it could take time before you see improvement, and then there might be this huge light bulb moment where they've been wondering what the hell I've been talking about, and then it all clicks into place. But it clicks into place when they've got the right situation to be able to apply it. But yeah, and other situations, it could be as obvious as they make a big change. They might make a life change. Others will be that they've actually recognized they didn't have any boundaries, and now they have, and they can talk to me about how it's worked for them, and how a space where they didn't have a boundary and they now do has enabled them to do X, Y, Z, because that's there. Some of them are self-imposed boundaries as well, which is interesting. I think the common idea with boundaries is that people are putting them in place with other people, and but it's not always like that. Sometimes the boundary has to be on yourself. For instance, social media is an obvious one there. So personal scrolling time. Okay, you're doing 5.5 hours a day. You have to put a boundary around that to get that to whatever it needs to be that will free up the time for you to do the stuff you haven't got time to do. That's an easy one. But you may put another boundary around social media, not around time, but actually the number of platforms or the type of accounts that are being followed, the accounts that are not bringing you joy. They're not good for you. They're not serving you. So yeah, there's lots of practical things, less easy to measure people when it's not a practical application, but it comes out in other ways. Yeah, it does come out in other ways. The fact that they're still seeing me. If I have a coach drop off, I know they've dropped off because they haven't been doing the work, and they'll come back. But I know, I mean, we've all been there. It's like, you go to the gym, and then if you can't get to the gym, suddenly you're never going to the gym again. That's part of the coaching cycle. But what we also teach is that just slipping a day isn't forever. We keep getting back on. Same with drinking and everything. And that's another thing. I don't know whether to, the fact that now I'm now sober, even though I realised I didn't have an issue with it per se, I am considering going down that road as well. So that's something else I'm thinking about in developing coaching in the getting sober space too.
Okay. I mean, do you still fancy a drink?
No, not at all.
That's not an offer, so I'm not really.
Yeah.
But you don't like, it's like, when I gave up cigarettes, I still really wanted a cigarette. I mean, not so much now, not at all, but
No, not at all.
Right.
Well, I did actually give up smoking the year before I stopped drinking as well.
Let me right, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I would say giving up smoking was far harder than giving up drinking. Because with the drinking, as I say, after a few months, I felt like a different person. The smoking didn't make me feel like a different person. I just still wanted a cigarette.
Yeah. And I guess you're doing the smoking every day. Multiple times a day.
It's more habitual. Yeah. So I mean, with smoking, you're not only giving up the nicotine, you're giving up the habit and the association and everything else with other things at the time you do it. With the drinking, because I wasn't a regular drinker, I didn't have that kind of association or the need for it. Yeah.
you talk about boundaries.
Yeah.
So my question on boundaries is, how important is setting boundaries, and what strategies do you recommend for maintaining them? In my pea brain of boundary, is it as simple as just saying no to stuff?
It can be as simple as saying no, but when you set the boundary, you have to be clear on how you're going to implement it. Let me see if I can think of an example. Okay, I'll use the social media one as an easy one again. And
Okay.
I say no to mindless scrolling by putting downloading app ABC to limit me to 1 hour a day, something like that. So there's what I'm saying no to, and then how I'm going to make sure it happens. It's always a two-part statement. So I will, and then by doing whatever.
Yeah.
So that two-part tends to work. And I think, there are other things. So I say no to working late every night by planning my day better, or by saying no to Director X, who is constantly at my desk.
I hate Director
And
X.
yeah, I know, awful. But it might be more complicated than that. I mean, that's saying no. Maybe you may need to think that out and then realize that you're not the right person to be answering to Director X anyway. And Director X should be going to, Jennifer over the way and speaking to that person, or maybe they should be doing themselves, or maybe I should be training them how to do it themselves. There's things like that where you think it's a boundary between you and another person, but sometimes you need to reflect and do the old kind of 5 whys. Why is that interaction happening? It could be that I've just been a people pleaser and not said no. But if I think about it logically, it's that old kind of teach a man to fish. If I actually went back to Director X and said, you don't need me to do this for you, it's really simple. You could do it, or other person can do it. So that's on me then to do an extra task in teaching, but that's a one-off, and then that removes that whole piece. So the two-step approach in the statement tends to work in a lot of situations. It's what you want to do, and then how are you going to do it?
Well, here's one. I don't know whether we've kind of touched on it before, but I'm probably for my own benefit. How do you help clients identify what they actually want when maybe they don't know themselves?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? So when you say they don't know what they want, they're in that they don't know why they're seeing me as a coach, or they don't know what they want from life.
I think probably the latter, because I think,
Okay.
sometimes we can get, to use the word stuck again,
Yeah.
we can get stuck in a rut or whatever. People say, we'll get out of that rut. And you're like, okay, well, I will get out of that rut, but I don't really know. And I suppose that goes back to core values again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really
Exactly.
know when I get out the rut, or if I can get out the rut, what I actually want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's values. It's when I've had people come to me and they say they don't really know what is the matter, and it's a great word. I love this word, but they feel discombobulated. They
Yes.
don't really, they're not sure what's wrong, but they know something's wrong. And that values absolutely is the first thing, because if they don't understand their values, they won't know what's out of alignment. If they do understand their values, then the first thing we do is look to see how is their world fulfilling each of those. And I would recommend people don't look at more than 6 values. Kind of 4 or 5 are adequate, but I wouldn't go more than 6, because then, and I'm not always sure people can find one single core. I think I do, because I think it's clear for me that growth is mine, but some people, the top 3 are kind of interchangeable. But yes, absolutely right, values, because then you can see if they've got a value is growth, and then in their world, they're not doing anything to learn anything new. They're not inspired by anybody or anything. Their job is, they've perhaps been in their job for a very long time, and they're not even showing signs of wanting to do something else. I think then that it may not be their job that needs to change. They may find a hobby outside of work. And that's the other thing. Some people try and find say they've got 5 values. They want to tick all the boxes of those 5 in every interaction. So they want work to deliver all 5. They want their partner to deliver all 5. And it doesn't work like that. You could draw a lovely matrix of all the relationships across the top and all the values down the side, and then see where people are checking off each one, and where they've not got perhaps 2 or 3 values being checked off in their relationship or their work, then you start to think, is that the right place for you? Is that the right partner for you? They don't need to, change those things immediately. They need to try and find what they can do before they make any big decisions. So if they've got a partner who's only kind of meeting one of those values with them, then they look at the others and sit down and then work out, okay, what can we do more of together that's going to tick one of the other ones? Or the same in work. If their work's not serving them in more than 1 or 2 of the values, then they'd say, am I in the right job, or what can I do within my role to tick some of those boxes? And that's another thing that I look at as well. And this can work in relationships. I wrote about this a few weeks ago. If you've been in a role a long time or in a relationship a long time and it's becoming a little bit stale, it's good to take a step back and imagine going back in day one in that role. So, if you've been in a job for 3 years and you can't really see that it's going anywhere, or actually there's nothing more for you to change or improve within that role, take a step back and imagine, right, I'm Karen, I've just landed on this role on day one. What would I do? Who would I need to meet? Who are my stakeholders? What are the processes? How does it work? Who are my suppliers, or who am I interacting with? What's broken? What's working? What could we do more of? Having that first day view, you can do that anytime. Doesn't matter how long you've been in that situation, in that role, or in that relationship. So it's good to step back and have some fresh eyes on a situation.
It's interesting. Like, so I think I had 5 core values, and it's interesting that you so my mate James loves a Venn diagram, right? So you could draw your Venn diagram and see what overlaps in terms of relationships, kids, family, hobbies, and see where those things overlap. And it just made me thinking there of what those 4 or 5 values are and what would tick what boxes. And just while you were talking there, I was thinking, so if that is the case, it'd be an interesting exercise to do. If that is the case, if work doesn't tick any of those boxes, then, and you spend 8 to 10 hours, sometimes 12 hours a day doing that thing.
That's a problem. It is. I love a Venn diagram too, but it can get really complicated with this, which is why I like it as a matrix with the relationships across the top and then the values down the side. I think visually I can cope with that a lot more easily, and it's easy to do on a bit of paper or in a spreadsheet, which is nice. You can even grade them if you wanted. You could score each one in, you could rank them or whatever.
So if I had let's say I had my 5 core values down the left-hand side.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking what you'd have along the top. So
you'd have your job, you'd have your partner, family life, friends, hobbies, and hopefully you will have a lot of ticks that go all over. That's what I'm saying. You don't need to have all 5 in every column, but you do want to have them all. But if you counted across, you'd want to have a few in a few different areas delivering them, because otherwise, if you did only find that it was, say, your partner that was delivering them all and not your work, that's a huge amount of pressure on that relationship to keep delivering against all of these values. The idea is to have a spread of the different areas of your life that deliver against them, and then that's healthy as well, isn't it? In your relationships. And
that would be interesting, because I think there will be areas where there are a lot of ticks and there will be areas where there are very few ticks. I think my kids would have most of the ticks, because they do get ticks if they're bringing in the long grass or whatever. Different ticks.
That's amazing. But then kids grow up.
But kids grow up, yes. Yeah. I mean, the podcast, that's got to be a tick in the creative box.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Loving that. But no, it's an interesting exercise to do.
And it's not meant to be an exercise that provokes big decisions, but it should be provocative enough that you think about why some areas are not, and then start to explore how they could.
Yeah.
It's meant to be a positive exercise. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. But I said, before you mentioned that, I'd not really thought about, yes, I've got my core values, and yes, doing your towards move under the ACT therapy, doing your towards move, but I hadn't really kind of thought about putting that into different categories of your life. Yeah, interesting.
And then that may lead to boundaries. You may lead to being able to set some boundaries in there, again, in a positive way. Yeah.
Okay. if you could give your younger self I think I know what it's going to be. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I'm not sure you would know what this one is actually, but I was interviewed a while ago and was asked this question, and I'm going to give the same answer.
Okay.
And that would be your true self. So if I looked at 5-year-old Karen, and then I looked at 25-year-old, and maybe every decade, I probably, because I got so caught up in the corporate world, moved further away from
Mm,
little Karen. And now I'm out of that space largely. I feel like I'm more the real me
mm,
again. So
mm.
authenticity is one of my values.
Yeah.
And there's different schools of thought on that. Authenticity in itself can be a value, but it can also be sit alongside. And if you are living true to all of your other values, you'll be living authentically anyway.
Mm,
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a value in itself. But I believe now the work that I do and the way that I live, that I'm more true to myself than I have been since I was a child. And that's amazing. So yeah, I think that's what I'd say to young Karen. Stay true to yourself.
it's interesting in that it kind of goes back to core values and what's important in your life. Again, if you listen to the podcast, you'll know that we go off a lot of tangents. The Talking Heads song, whereas it's not Road to Nowhere, but he says, and one day you wake up with a beautiful wife and a beautiful house, and you
Yeah,
go,
yeah, yeah,
how did I get here?
yeah,
And you kind of
yeah.
end up, I won't ask ages, but I was 50 in December, and you go, how the did I
I
get to
know.
half a century old?
Yeah.
And what have I done or achieved, or did I end up where I thought, where a 5-year-old, 10-year-old, 20-year-old me was going to end up?
Oh,
And
it
again,
goes
it's like
very quickly. It goes very quickly.
mm,
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm 57 now, so I'll be 58 before the end of this year. And uh, I don't know what happened between 35 and now, because it's just like that, you
mm,
know.
mm,
But that's another thing you think of. There's still time to make the change, isn't there? I mean, you see
mm,
loads of LinkedIn posts where people say, when people started this and people started that when they're 50, 60, 70. I mean, it's amazing. I mean,
mm,
and now more than ever, so many people past 50 who are starting their own businesses and doing their own thing. And
mm,
it's great. Love
mm.
it. Yeah.
Lots of food for thought.
Mm,
I suppose going on from what I was talking about, ACT,
mm.
what role do you think self-compassion plays in personal development, and how can people
Huge.
cultivate it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge. And it's not a luxury, or it shouldn't be seen as, the whole self-care movement is amazing, but it gets a bad rap. And then,
Mm,
just if people say self-care, it's a bit woo-woo, isn't it? But it's not. It's really important. It's the whole thing around, putting your oxygen mask on first, and that kind of analogy is, you have to look after yourself and you have to like yourself way before you start thinking about all of your other relationships.
mm,
There was something I read the other day, and I quoted it yesterday to a friend actually, and I can't remember the exact words, but I love this. Right, so the words are all going to be wrong, but it said, if you chase butterflies, they'll fly away, but if you cultivate the garden, they will come to
come to
you.
you. Yeah,
And I thought that was amazing. And I say the words are probably all a little bit wrong there, but you understand the
yeah,
sentiment.
the idea. Yeah.
So I think in the same way, if you really look after yourself and learn to love yourself,
Hmm.
people will come to you.
Hmm.
And I think in the coaching space, I mean, with a really commercial head on, clients will come to you, not
Yeah,
just in coaching, but in any space, really.
yeah.
If people see you, that you are confident in yourself, that you are giving yourself the time and the energy and whatever's needed, then they trust you.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
no point me being falling apart at the seams and trying to coach people, it's but not even in the coaching world. Self-compassion is hugely important.
Hmm.
And it's very hard for some people to find that, or to give themselves permission, until you have that conversation to say, once you've done that, your children will see that,
Yeah.
your partner will see that, it spreads, and it isn't quite infectious as well when you see people go through that change.
Hmm.
Back to your point earlier, actually, but how do you measure and how do you see where people have been successful? That is one of those things that people, it's a glow up. And it's not about, the fact they've now gone to the gym or anything else. It's in here. You see
Yeah.
people that start to like themselves. It is visible, hugely visible.
I'm probably oversharing here, but I'll say it because I think that's, part of the reason we started the podcast, to try and not give a false sort of picture of
Yeah.
what's going on. My daughter, talking about confidence and just feelings and kids picking up on stuff, unspoken stuff, because this isn't something I would have said in front of my daughter. So I've got two girls, 7 and 4, and the 7-year-old gave me again. I'm paraphrasing because I have kept the bit of paper, but somewhere she's written down a bit of paper. Dear Daddy, I know you don't think that you're the best daddy in the world, but trust me. Or she's got to know that you are the most wonderful thing in my world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Now I've never said to her, but again, it's going back to your point of how you present yourself and your body language.
yeah,
And I mean, I've never gone to her, do you know what, Izzy? I think I'm a really shit dad.
yeah,
And deep down, I know I'm not. But there's that insecurity, and that clearly feeds into
yeah,
others. Especially I don't want that feeding into my daughters, because again, you want to be that role model, you want to be that, confident person that knows how to deal with things or whatever. So that kind of breeds into them. And it's just interesting that you say that. I haven't obviously said to her what I sometimes think, but
yeah. But I don't know. If we go back to authenticity, though, you talked about self-compassion. I think that's
mm,
slightly different from being that confident person, because I don't think there's any problem at all in your lovely daughter seeing you having some days where you're less than confident.
mhm, mhm,
You know, otherwise there's a danger that she'll suddenly get to 16 and realize you're not perfect. And so for her to see that you're fallible and you're human being,
mm.
I don't think that's harmful. I think that's slightly different.
Yeah,
And I
it's
think you are being
again,
very honest, but you're clearly a really, really honest guy. But I don't think I would worry too much about that. But what she
mm.
said is amazing. Yeah.
What she said is amazing, and it's just the fact that, like you say, she's picked up on that somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
At that particular time. I'm not saying she think, like a
Yeah.
lot of things. I'm not saying she feels that all the time, but I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
obviously having a moment, and I suppose that is interesting. Again, I never really thought of that before, but my dad was a very strong person, and very well, sorry, presented himself as a very strong, and he was, to an extent, a
Mm,
very strong person, and very capable and very practical, and I don't think I ever saw it. Was one occasion right at the end, but other than that, I never saw him cry.
mm,
And there is that, because I didn't see his vulnerable moments, and because I didn't, he's then on this pedestal where that's what I'm supposed to be. So if I'm not that person where I'm just on it all the time, and I know, and I'm in control, and I know what I'm doing, and then I've in some way failed. So, you're right. I think in to an extent, that if you show your fallibility,
mm.
and that you're human, and we don't, as parents, always get it right, then
I feel sad for your dad that he didn't feel able to.
mm,
I think you're lucky you live in 2024.
mm,
And again, it goes back to the shoulds and the limiting beliefs and all of that, doesn't it? Of what you are not your dad.
mm,
You're
mm,
you're living now.
yeah,
It's a different time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And your dad was living with whatever he thought of your grandfather, and
yeah, yeah,
all of that. There's an exercise I do. This is, I think it's, I can't remember where it came from, but I think it might be under NLP actually. There's an exercise I do called the Museum of Limiting Beliefs, and that's all about trying to park a belief that you have that stemmed from something in the past where you've still got that belief out of respect.
mm,
And actually, now's not the time for you to still have that. It's out of date. But if you can visualize a museum and whatever that looks like, something that your father would have appreciated looking at, in some cultures it may be gold, in some others it may be built of wood or steel. It depends on how you think he would like to see a museum. And you put that limited belief in the museum. So you're respecting it, it's still
mm,
there.
mm,
You're just not living your life by it.
yeah,
And so I really like that idea, because you're not dissing it and kicking it into the side to say, actually, that's a load of nonsense. Nobody does that anymore. It's saying, actually, I respect how you lived your life
Yeah.
and how I've lived a lot of my life. However, it doesn't really serve me now. So I'm going to put it in the museum and maintain the respect for it,
Yeah.
but live my life the way I think is appropriate for now and for my children. And yeah, so I think that's a really nice way of looking at it, that it's respected.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
like you say, rather than going, wow, different times and just kicking it into the long grass.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
To finish up, and I said, I think as I got to know you, I think I became aware of you through your article. You were an article in the Telegraph.
Yes.
And I don't know why, because I don't read the Telegraph, so I don't know how
Nor
I
do
saw
I.
it. But it must have been in there that you like cold. It came up that you like cold water swimming.
I do. Huge fan. Yeah.
For the co-host Paul, who I can't get to for love nor money to get cold water swimming, can you sell it to him? What are the benefit? What do you feel are the benefits of a dip?
Do you know how difficult this is to explain to somebody who hasn't
I
done it?
know, because I've tried to do it myself, so I was hoping you could
Yeah.
do it for me.
Okay, so right, so purely from a practical point of view, my back, if if the inflammation is up on a particular day, it immediately obviously brings the heat down,
Yeah.
because as my husband will attest, he can be it can be 6 inches away from my back, and the heat, I'm like a radiator. So from a purely practical sense, from pain relief, it's amazing. Right. So the next thing I say is getting into cold water hurts. And I've swum all year round. So I've been in water that's been 2 degrees, and I don't wetsuit. I just hate the
Oh,
feeling of
really? Yeah.
wetsuit. So I'm I don't stay in for long, but I do go in all year round. The feeling when you go in is pain, but it's great. And I read an article a while ago that described the pain when you've not got a wetsuit on, when you're swimming, when it's 2 or 3 degrees, like having a lobster clamped on your bum. And I think that is such a great description of claws. And it
Yeah.
is like, now, the enjoyment is not, for me anyway, is not at the time I'm doing it. The enjoyment for me is when I get out and your whole body
Yeah.
is alive.
Mm-hmm.
Every single from your fingertips to your toes, every single nerve ending is alive. I don't know. I don't think you ever feel more in tune with nature, in tune with our world, and have your whole body that feels incredible, and your mind as well. I mean, and also the feeling of going into cold water, it depends where you are, but usually you've got an amazing view as well. You can see the horizon. There's the whole thing around distance and, you know, grounding and feeling your place on the earth and everything else. But the cold water itself, I would just say it sets your whole body into every nerve is tingling, and in a really good way. I can't describe it. It's so difficult
No,
to describe.
it's very difficult. There's an Irish guy that I follow on Instagram. He's very good, and he was obviously saying about the benefits when you come out, when you get that euphoria when you come out,
Yeah.
and you don't really have to be in for very long to get that.
No.
But he also said about the fact that it's like perfect mindfulness, because if you're stressed or if you're worried or if you're anxious, when your body hits that cold water,
Oh yeah.
you're not
You could
thinking
think of
about
nothing else.
anything other
Yes.
than Jesus Christ, it's cold.
Yeah,
Because I don't
exactly.
even ever get used to it. Like
Yeah.
on the days that I don't go out,
Mm.
I'll have a cold shower.
Yes. Yeah.
And I never look forward to I never look forward to turning that dial down. So it's not
No.
like you still have to like step out, get through your mind through stepping over that threshold
Yes.
to go, right, come on, you're going to do this
Yeah.
and turn it to cold. It's not like you go, oh, I cannot wait to get that cold shower tonight.
No, but afterwards, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
always afterwards. It's amazing. Yeah. So yeah, there must be something scientific, a biological thing that would describe why that happens. But yeah, the euphoria afterwards is amazing. And as I say, I think it's also, if you're actually swimming, is the whole environment. And like you say, it focuses the mind. There's not a lot you can think about when you do feel like you've got a lobster clamped onto to your bottom.
In 2 degrees of heat. Yeah.
And focusing on your breathing as well. So I
Mhm.
don't know about you, but when I go into the water, I do actually do some box breathing before I go in and slow my breathing down. And then you've not so much got the shock.
Yeah.
I think I acclimatise to the water much quicker by doing that. So
Mhm.
before I go in, I perhaps take about a minute to do 4, box breathing, where you in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And that just brings everything down. So when you go in, you've not got that, so much.
I'm glad you
Yeah.
explained box breathing because that was going to be my. So it's a box because it's 4 4 4 4.
Yes, exactly.
Right, got you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It just brings everything down. And you don't even need to do a minute, even 30 seconds of that. And that just helps when you're going in. But yeah, I mean, it's just you're at one with everything, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I could do it every day. I'm at the seaside at weekends, but yeah.
I've got. Have you seen any? I don't know if you've seen any of our posts on Instagram. I bought a whiskey barrel.
Oh, I've been looking at them. I didn't know you'd got one. Yeah,
I've
I've been
got
looking
one.
at them on eBay.
Yeah.
To do an ice or cold plunge.
Yeah. So you can. I'll send you the link afterwards. There's a place up by me, and they do deliver countrywide.
Okay.
I think it's called. It's up in Calendar, so it's not far from here. So they just drop mine off, but they do deliver, and you get like a bloody great barrel. So they do all sorts of shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
All you need to do is drill a hole in it and put it in the bottom and put a tap in.
Yeah.
They'll cut the lid off for you, so cut the top off, so that becomes your lid. So I bought a couple of handles off Temu and
Yeah.
just drilled them on, so you just got the lift,
Yeah.
and that's it. Just fill it with water, and it's got because I bought one of those, the plastic ones that you can buy online.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to think what they're called now, but you'll have seen them on Facebook or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because they're plastic, well, first of all, I'm 6'1" and even sat down it, not kneeling, but sat down with my bum on the floor.
Yeah.
It wasn't covering my shoulders
Okay.
properly.
Yeah.
And because it's plastic, it kind of goes, if it leaves any length of time, it goes a bit
Yeah.
slimy.
No. I'd go for the wooden one. But did you have have you got a little ladder or something for
Well,
popping?
I've just got
Well,
one
I'm
of the.
only 5'2", so
Oh,
yeah.
well, I do have a little step. So this is the thing. So the Crafty Barrel company is called in Calendar.
Right.
The ones that I think they sell specifically for ice baths are probably on me chest height. They're like tall and narrow.
Yeah.
And again, I had the conference because I went there specifically to go, well, hang on a minute. Because I find myself walking around beforehand. I found myself walking around garden centers going, oh, I'm never going to fit in that. Is that a normal size barrel? Or is that a small barrel? This one's bigger. I mean, because I don't realize they are all come in different shapes and sizes. So I
Yeah.
thought, sod it, I'll go and have a look. It's only 20 minutes up the road. I'll go
Yeah.
and have a look. And yeah, lo and behold, the one that they sell is kind of up to there on me, which is great, but and narrower. But I thought, how the hell am I going to get in and out of that?
Yeah.
So I've actually had so it probably comes, I was going to say just above the belly button, probably higher than that, but wider so I can get right down into it
Yeah. Yeah.
and squat into it. And with that, I've just got one of the kids, like the fold up plastic steps.
Okay. Yeah.
I've just got one of those and I keep it in the
You
garden
get in
and
and
just
out.
step
Yeah.
on that. And
Yeah.
I'm
Oh
sure if
yeah.
you spoke to your husband nicely, he'd build you a couple of steps out of some.
Oh, you're joking. No, he might be do big engineering projects, but he can't
He
do
can't build a
anything like
piece
that.
of
I'm the DIY person at home. But yeah, where I'm working at the moment, I'm in a garden room at the end of my garden, but behind me, I've got space where I actually have all my weights and stuff that I use in the morning. So
Okay.
I've got space around there as well to actually. So I have had my eye on one for a while, so that
Yeah.
I can plunge during the week when I've not got access to the sea.
Yeah.
I've got a plunge. Yeah. Oh, I'll have a look at that. Crafty Barrel
Crafty
Company.
Barrel Company in Calendar. That's where you want to go.
Yeah.
What is next for Karen Roberts?
Okay. So next, I've got a few things going on in the background. Why I've when I'm creating, I create quite a lot of content for LinkedIn. So based on the challenges that my clients bring to me, I then go and do more research and then writings on that. So I have a series every month. I do a topic called In the Spotlight, and then throughout the month there'll be 7 posts, an intro, 5 takeaways, and then a summary. And I put all of those on my website so people can go back and read them all. They're all downloadable for free. But what I'm doing is taking them and making them into paid for workbooks that I will be selling. So they're not
Okay.
ready yet. I'm probably another 3 months away from having them ready, but there will be workbooks that can be bought through my website, or I'm not quite sure where else they'll be, but there will be workbooks available. The other thing I'm working on is, I actually posted today, is I'm starting to work more with organizations who are giving coaching to some of their staff as a benefit at a time when perhaps people can't give the pay rises that people want
Yeah.
because of the associated incremental NI and bonuses and everything that is multiplied from a pay increase. An option is to, for that company to give the staff coaching,
Other benefits.
which is
Yeah.
a one-off payment, and makes the staff feel, that the company have got faith in them, they're investing in them and everything else. So
Yeah.
I'm starting to do a bit more networking with organizations rather than looking, directly at kind of business to consumer client focus. So I'm looking more at businesses to say, what would you like to do for your staff at a time if you're not able to give them pay increases? And
Brilliant.
so kind of changing the dynamic of who I'm networking with.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for giving up your time. That's you've been blethering away there for a good
A long
hour,
time.
over an hour. And so if people want to get in contact with you, is the website the best way to do that?
It is, yeah. That's www.vivendus.co.uk, or I'm Karen Roberts on LinkedIn. I've got a Vivendus page as well, but probably best to search me out directly. All my contact details are on there. Yeah, please get in touch. Happy to
Brilliant.
answer any questions.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and
Great, loved it.
wish you all the best.
Let's start a podcast about our mental health for no good reason why. Let's call it Mind Cake.
And for anybody who listens to the bits at the end, exciting news that we've got a Christmas party lined up. Christmas Eve, we have a Mind Cake Christmas party. So stay tuned.